Chapter 236. Office of the Head of Lombardy. There was a brief silence between the two people, Shananet and Lulak. Lulak's face, rubbing his bearded chin like a habit, darkened with worries, thinking about his granddaughter. Shananet smiled a little at the sight. Father. When Shananet grew up, Lulak was very strict. Who knew that Lulak would change like this? Don't worry too much. But, despite Shananet's soothing words, Lulak's complexion doesn't seem to ease. Come to think of it, this is not a serious problem. Tia will be the head of Lombardy. So, wouldn't they still see each other regularly because she needs to talk with the second prince? However, the crown prince cannot leave the crown princess seat vacant. So the second prince would have someone to sit next to him, and Tia would just watch the situation unfold. Oh God, thinking that his granddaughter's heart would be torn, Lulak's insides seemed to go haywire. Don't be so upset, Shananet said warmly, covering the back of Lulak's hand. But even now, Tia will be clearing her mind little by little. The issues about Anjanas was very complicated. She would have run into the imperial family frequently. Well, I don't know. Shananet once again put a soft smile on her lips and said, I think Tia and the second prince will solve the problem by themselves. Haha, yes, maybe they will. Lulak stared at Shananet's smiling face and laughed. Tia would do that. He had an infinite trust with his granddaughter. Then it would be nice to help her out with what we can do right now. Lulak said so and rose from his seat. On your way out, tell Viz and Rolier to come, Shananet. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Wetter. A second drunk administrator standing next to Perez swallowed a gulp without knowing. This was because it was the first time he had seen the deputy head, Lady Lombardi, in person. Ryan, who was last sent to Ivan with the second prince and was promoted to first rank administrator for his excellent work, always mentioned a person named Florentia Lombardi. He said that she's the only one who can handle the second prince at will. Doesn't matter if they are engaged or not. His Highness the second prince is still such a terrifying man who does what he wants. But the moment he saw Lombardi's deputy head entering the office, he thought it really might be so. Her doe-like green eyes were attractive, but she was emitting tremendous dark energy that her beauty could not be seen at the moment. She even had the famous Clarivan pellet in tow as if he were her personal secretary. Looking around the office, all the other administrators except himself were bowing politely as if they were oppressed by the deputy head of Lombardy. Deputy head Lombardi, Paris immediately rose from his seat and greeted Florentia. No need for pleasantries. I'm not here to say anything nice. Okay. Perez sat back in silence saying so, but Administrator Wetter clearly saw the corners of the second prince's mouth, quietly turned upward but just for a split second. Florentia took a seat on the opposite side of where Perez was sitting. The heads of the administrators who were working together in the office rose and turned to watch as Clarivan Pellet carefully put the documents in front of her. His Highness the Second Prince and the Deputy Head of Lombardy were so famous these days that whenever people gather, they were always the topic. Not to mention the Second Prince, who defeated the Empress and Anjanas, was eventually selected as the Crown Prince. But it was the Deputy Head of Lombardy who was actually receiving more attention. This woman would go down in history, a woman who transcends a generation and becomes the Lombardi successor. She is the daughter and sole heir of Galliahan Lombardi, the owner of the Galliahan clothing store, and the Lord of Cheshire, who became the center of Eastern trade, and most of all, the recently revealed true owner of the pellet company. When the last information was known, she literally turned the empire upside down. The story of the Brown family kicking the Angenes out and becoming the new representative of the West was pushed back and buried. Though the rumors that have recently started to spread are about the Empress and Angenes, the deputy head of Lombardy played a big role in it. If it's true, then the soon to be crowned second prince and the deputy head of Lombardy were truly perfect political partners. Wetter, the oldest of the executives gathering here, quickly settled behind Perez. However, he wasn't too worried. They were even engaged, so what's the big deal? Although the angry face of the deputy head of Lombardy was lingering on his mind, Administrator Wetter took it easy, thinking so. But then, how on earth did the imperial family manage their assets? In a few words, Wetter's futile expectations were shattered. Florentia glared at Perez, dissatisfied with the documents handed over by Clarivan. What is this? Perez beckoned to Wetter. Speaking in a calm voice, it meant to explain what the documents are about. One of the families where Angenes borrowed money included the imperial family. Perez's red eyes briefly turned to the administrators. Seeing them sweating, it was obvious that they didn't have an answer. It's a little less than 2,000 gold in total. Perez looked over the contents of the papers and said, What do you want me to do, Deputy Head Lombardi? Florentia answered in a commanding voice as if she had been waiting for his words. The imperial family should hand over the reserves. This time, the administrators were stunned and began to read the faces of both Florentia and Perez. No matter how close they are, can she really say that to a member of an imperial family? No, is it allowed because she's a Lombardi? Still, he will soon become the crown prince. He hasn't been appointed yet, so does that mean Deputy Head Lombardi's position is higher? All sorts of thoughts passed through the administrators' heads. What is more, Florentia began to pressure Perez. The Empress and the Anjanas owe this irresponsible debt because the imperial family did not stop them and overlooks the situation. Although she was a little rough, there's nothing wrong in what she said. Under the imperial law, the imperial reserves take precedence over any circumstances, so the imperial family should waive their rights over it. It means to take responsibility for your negligence. No, he take that back. She was very rough. There was a heavy silence in the office, but Florentia showed no sign of retreat. Rather, she was looking at Perez without even blinking. Whatever the case, the Empress was a member of the imperial family, and it was right for them to take responsibility for it. Accepting Tia's words, Perez nodded and replied, I'll do it. But, Your Highness, that kid. Weather quickly gave a pointed look at the young administrator standing near the doorway. It was Spio, a six-drunk administrator who just started a few months ago, the person who voiced his dissatisfaction with Perez's decision. The 20-year-old Spio gets into a lot of trouble with his surroundings because of his hot-tempered personality. That's how he ends up in trouble now. Even His Highness the Second Prince had his face hardened and looked at Spio with cold eyes. Even if she's Spio's senior administrator, Weather just closed his eyes tightly, bowing now, and asking for forgiveness would not save his situation. What are you dissatisfied for? Florentia asked at Spio. It was quite interesting to see even a smile hanging around her lips. That is, Spio glanced at Perez and seemed to be asking for permission. Seeing that, Florentia said to Spio, I'm the one who asks you, but you're looking at the wrong person. Look at me and talk to me. Wetter sighed inwardly as he watched the situation before him. It was so sad that Spio did not understand the subtle power structure between the imperial family and Lombardy. According to the law, the most superior figure in this place was, of course, the prince. However, the deputy head of Lombardy has more power than the prince, who has not yet officially appointed as the crown prince. That's what she meant by what she said. I have the highest position in this room. Administrator Wetter urgently blinked his eyes at Spio, urging him to quickly answered the deputy head of Lombardy. Then I will take the liberty of telling you what I think. What's your name? Yes, I was suddenly curious about your name and position. It's Ricky Spio. I'm a six-drunk administrator. All right, Administrator Spio, keep talking. But Spio's face hardened. Just by saying his name, he felt a lot of pressure. It was as if he had a sense of responsibility that he never had before. Lombardy seems to be taking unfair profit. Oh, unfair profit? Yes, it is true that Emperor's personal and arbitrary actions are held accountable by the entire imperial family. However, the pellet company sizably securing the reserves would be unfair. Gradually, the voice became more like the sound of an ant, but Administrator Spio said what he wanted to say to the end. Then what if I penalize Administrator Spio instead? At Florentia's words, Spio flinched his shoulder. Well, wah. With a face that was about to cry, Spio looked at his boss, Wetter, to plead for help. Wetter quietly avoided his gaze, but soon after, Florentia smiled and said to Claravan, Claravan, give the prince the proposal. Soon, a document with a few sheets of paper was handed over to Perez. The pellet will receive only half of the refunded amount from Angenas. I'll replace the rest with something else. Durak Merchant Guild? Yes, he says he is willing to waive his authority under the condition that all business rights at the Durak Merchant Guild are transferred to the Pellets Company as shares, Prince. The administrators nodded unconsciously. At the time when the parent organization, Angenas, liquidated, Durak Merchant Guild got no immediate cash value, but it had one thing left that is useful. You are referring to the business Koroy Textiles. Perez said in a low voice. It's Koroy Textiles of the Durak Merchant Guild that my people are using. Pellet Company will take over and continue the production. We have a history of being in the Koroy business from the beginning, so you don't have to worry about it. We will be able to pay the other noble families and get their money back. The Pellet Company will have the largest shares, so I'm sure you will. Tia said it profoundly, as if she's proud of her idea. Paris smiled furtively at her disingenuous attitude. Do as you please, Deputy Head Lombardi. As Paris responded, Tia stood up from her seat. It means she is done with her business here. As she left the office, she paused for a moment and looked at Administrator Spio and said, Be careful not to act too rashly. However, your courage to say the right thing was commendable. Oh, thank you. Administrator Spio quickly lowered his head and with his face turning red. In the office, which became quiet after Florentia left, Administrator Wetter found himself smiling and wiping his forehead sweat in relief. Also seeing the cold-blooded prince smiling softly, he realized that his senior administrator Ryan was right. She really was the one holding the reins to this fearsome prince. The way she resolved the conflict that could arise between the imperial family and the nobility was also very wise. Administrator Vetter thought it would be great if that person would become the empress in the future. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. V's head was throbbing from the alcohol he drank all night. He gulped down the water in front of him, suppressing the vial that was about to come out. He shouldn't throw up at this moment in front of his father, whom he hadn't met in a long while. Looking at V's with complex eyes, Lulak slowly opened his mouth. Get out of Lombardy, V's. End of chapter 236. No. Chapter 237. Hook. Cough. Shocked, V's, who was drinking water, coughed until his face turned red. Lulak waited silently, saying no more until V's commotion was over. Get out of the mansion? V's yelled at Lulak and continued. Where am I supposed to go when I leave the mansion? Well, that's up to you to decide. Even with the raging V's, Lulak did not respond hastily. From beginning to end, he reacted in a lackluster and thoroughly indifferent attitude. V's was quite unfamiliar with this image of his father. He was also scared. Those brown eyes always looked at them, siblings, unpleasantly. However, even with those strict eyes, father's compassion or affection has always existed. But now, Lulak was looking at him as if he were dealing with a complete stranger. I've already told Rollier. He said he would go to Ginfolk Street at his wife's house. But father, V's balked, fidgeting on the edge of the chair. This was no laughing matter. I don't even have a wife anymore. And then Angena's V's spoke in a manner that had always touched his father's weak side. Surely, you're not going to throw away your eldest son, right? How are Cyril and Belsac doing? Dulac asked. Huh? Oh, those two. V didn't answer easily. It was expected. He was told that Belsac was released, but he had never seen his face ever since. The same was true for Cyril. One day he came back from drinking at the pub and found that all of his wife's valuables had disappeared from the mansion. Pathetic. Lulak said as he clicked his tongue. You don't even know what's going on with your wife and children. You should have thought of taking care of your family. Do you have any idea where Cyril and Belsac are? You don't deserve to know. Lulak clicked his tongue once again. I won't say much, Viz. I'm thinking of handing over Lombardi to Tia sooner or later. So you get out before then. This is the last thing you can do for Lombardi's future. Tia, it's always Tia. Father only notices that girl who has no roots. Viz screamed at his lip as he leaped to his feet. That girl will lead this family. You gave her everything. Ha! The whole empire will laugh at us. You handed over the family to a granddaughter who was born from a nomad. Have you gone senile? V spat and drew blood around his neck. It's all a lie. That pellet is hers. She's been greedy and wicked since she was a child, so you don't know what she might be capable of. His body soaked in liquor, couldn't scream for long. Ha, ha. Using his lips, V harshly wiped his mouth, covered with an untidy beard, and said as he pointed a finger at his father. You are ruining this family with your hands. This great family. You are ruining Lombardy. Do you really think so? Lolak asked in a low tone. What do you think would have changed if it's you, Viz? Viz tried to say something, but he was suffocated. He didn't know why. However, no matter how hard he tried, the words I would have done better did not come out of his mouth. Lulak sighed in sadness as he watched Viz, who whose mouth was puffing like a goldfish. At that moment, he pulled out a letter in the drawer of the table and handed it to Vise. This is Balzac's handwriting. With his trembling hands, Vise opened the letter. It contained the current situation of Balzac and Cyril, which he conveyed calmly in finer writing than what he'd known in his memory. Tia looked after Balzac to the end. Lulak said to Vise, the Empress ordered a knight to kill Balzac and was trying to disguise his death as suicide. What? Suicide? It must have been intended to make Balzac a scapegoat for Astana. But Balzac was able to get away thanks to Tia. Then, that was the first thing she did after she became the successor to the household. Not only that, but Cyril and Balzac also found a house to live in peace. Lulak pointed to the letter in V's hand. It's a letter from Balzac to thank her for that. V's finished reading Balzac's letter with shaky eyes. Although it was a low-quality paper that was incomparable to the ones they used in the Lombardy mansion, a few lines of writing were enough to tell that Balzac's life was much more stable than before. I'm sorry and grateful. Please make sure to deliver my apology to Florentia. No, the deputy head of Lombardy. I hope from a distance that only peace will be in the road ahead of Lombardy. Balzac was sincerely apologizing. Tia has done a better job than anyone else to embrace and protect the family members, leaving her personal feelings aside. That was the most important duty of the head. So, Viz, I'll answer for you. You wouldn't have made a good householder, and Lombardy will become even greater under the leadership of Tia. Lulak's words contained unwavering conviction. Troubled, Viz hung his head and he sobbed, I wasn't good enough. I am lacking. Viz was truly repenting, but it was too late. When the next head is chosen, those who compete with them can choose either to leave the family or work for the family with the head's permission. Half of Lulak's brothers also left the family, and the other half remained. It is an inevitable process. But now, you don't even have that choice. It's your punishment for the stupid things you've done. Lulak calmly continued his remarks against Viz. People don't change. The slight enlightenment you have right now, that will make you a different person, is just a foolish hope. Go now, it's already raining. At this moment, Lulak only thought of Tia to succeed him. He chose his granddaughter to inherit the family. Before Tia takes over the family, pack your things and leave the mansion. You don't have to say anything more. Viz looked at Lulak for a moment in despair. Only now did he realize that he had nothing left. No house, no family. It was an unforgettable fact. Even if he drank all the alcohol in the world, Viz quietly laid down Balzac's letter in front of Lulak. At the last moment, he bowed to his father and took his leave. He was about to walk out of the main office with leaden steps when Lula called him. Please, don't drink too much alcohol. Take care of your health. It was the last request a father could make to his son. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I and Granny had dinner together as promised. Gilio and Mayron, who were on holiday, also came after hearing the news, and now we have gathered together for the first time in a long while. Is Paris still that popular in the academy? Of course. The second prince is a legend, a legend. Even in the academy, Granny's fanboying was still there. He completely forgot that Paris couldn't recognize him and showed him a terrifying aura. The second prince remembers my name. So it's like this, huh? Yes, of course. Isn't it a fan's dream to be receiving attention, whatever from it may be, whatever form it may be, from his idol? While stroking Crane's head, like I did when we were kids, I said, I should have been to the academy. It sounds fun listening to you talking about it. If my sister went to the academy, that would be great. Granny covered his mouth and muttered what he might have imagined. Myron fills a glass and red wine in front of Granny and said, if that happens, we will also follow you. Isn't that great? Right, Gilyu? However, the amount he kept pouring was quite large. Granny just celebrated his coming of age this year and has a very weak tolerance for alcohol. Looking at his face turning red, I said while pulling Granny's glass aside, Mayron, if Granny gets drunk, you have to give him a piggyback ride. Mayron took away the glass he had poured for him and poured less than half of that amount into a new glass in front of Granny. Hehe, Granny smiled, took the glass and drank the wine. Then I asked the twins, so will you two continue to be in the Knights of Lombardy? Us? Well, I guess so. I don't know about Mayron, but my goal is to be the commander of the Knights of Lombardy. What? You're weaker than me. Gilio and Mayron began to argue again. However, Granny's face, looking at the two, is strange. He looked envious and he also seemed sad. What's wrong, Granny? Yes, Granny replied after sipping the wine again. I just wish we could stay like this forever. That would be a little difficult, right? I want to see Sister Lorraine as well. Granny smiled bitterly. I had a rough idea of what was going on hearing his words. I guess grandfather had a conversation with your father. How did you know? Granny opened his eyes wide, apparently surprised. Soon he said in a somber voice, my parents are thinking of taking me and my brother to Jean Falk Street. I nodded. At least he has a wife to go back to. It's not such a bad situation for Rollier. However, McCreany wolfed down his wine again. I still want my sister to come to my graduation ceremony. Hope you're drinking too much. Try and eat this. I pushed a cheese cracker into Granny's mouth, smiling with a bitter face. Oh, thank you. So what do you want to say, Granny? I rested my chin with one hand while looking at Granny. I'll listen to you, so say it. Sister. Granny hesitated. However, his hesitation didn't last long. Soon he looked straight at me and opened his mouth. When I was young, why did sister make me read a lot of books? I just go along with it because I like being with you in the library, sister. Once he started talking, he goes on without stuttering. Indeed, I purposely educated my younger cousin quite early. But when I studied at the academy, I realized that the things my sister taught me were helpful for my future. The voice that seemed a little shaky at first also gradually stabilized. And the more I studied, the more I thought it wouldn't do because my studies had no purpose. So I thought about it. Where do I want to spend my knowledge? So what answer did you find? I want to work for Lombardi, sister. Granny's red face turned even redder as he answered. However, his bright eyes didn't shake at all. I want to help my sister even after she becomes the head of Lombardi. Please allow me, sister. I looked at Granny for a while and then slowly nodded. So be it. Really? Why do you think I educated you early, Granny? Just like my grandfather needed me in my previous life, I also needed someone I can trust and leave my work to that person too. That's why I thought it would be nice if Granny, the brightest among my cousins, could fill the spot. Instead, you shouldn't miss being the first place until you graduate. It means do not neglect your studies. Yes, I can do it well, Granny replied aloud. Great. It's a good day today, so let's drink to our heart's content. I'm opening one more bottle. As if the twins had waited, they pulled out two new bottles of vintage wine and said, what should I drink first? I don't know. Anything will do. Wait. The jolly twins, hoping to pour more wine, stopped at my words. I picked at the bottle. Not that one, that one. They don't know anything. That's more delicious. Open it quickly. Okay. As the twins opened the new bottle, I told Granny, recalling the letter that arrived this morning. We will be able to meet Lorraine soon. Elated, Granny smiled widely and nodded. Will you believe me when I say that that smiling face was the last memory of that night? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. At the same time, Paris was walking down the stairs to the dungeon. The sound of heavy shoes ranted about the humid cold air. Oh, you're here, your highness. What about the sinner? It's over there. A knight who was guarding the door of the prison answered with a rigid voice and walked ahead. Shortly after walking, Paris stood in front of a cell. At once, he said to the person sitting with her back upright in a shabby chair, are you having a peaceful night, Empress? End of chapter 237. Chapter 238. Among the prisoners in the dark and damp dungeon, Empress Rabini was sitting in the innermost cell. You don't look very comfortable, Perez said, casting a long dark shadow through a torchlight in the hall. In the dark, the Empress was like a withered flower. Her glamorous appearance that once caught everyone's attention has now lost its light. She was still sitting upright, pretending to be noble and confident, but in the eyes of the person standing outside the iron bars, she was just a filthy sinner. There was no place for beauty to settle on her face with her messy hair, dirty clothes, and eyes with dark circles from a lack of sleep. The reason was easy to predict. Aren't rats such nasty creatures? It was as it seemed like her secret was caught by Perez that the Empress' body shivered greatly. Easy to squeeze into even the tiniest gaps, and eats whatever it wants. All that sound of crawling around the bedside as if it was aiming for human flesh is likely to drive someone crazy. Whether it was a dungeon or an abandoned palace, it was the perfect home for creatures living in hiding, away from human eyes. Unlock the cell, Paris ordered the guard behind him. A couple of heavy clasps rang out in the dungeon, and soon Paris walked into the cell. Are you here to kill me? Empress Robini asked Paris with her eyes flaring. No, not yet, however. It seems there is no sign of remorse on the sinner. Ha, Empress Robini scoffed. I didn't do anything wrong. Only you and I fought a war with our lives. Indeed, I lost, but you're tearing Anjana's apart. It's like I've paid for my sins unfairly, the Empress said, raising her chin with her shameless face. I paid an unlawful price. Perez looked down at the Empress with cold eyes. The person who was punished has no intention of pleading for forgiveness, but that person paid an unlawful price. You have a strange way of summing things. Every night, no matter how much he tried to cover his ears from hearing the voice of his mother, he still heard it very clearly. You have a long way from fulfilling the pain my mother had gone through, Empress. Perez added briefly. Do you still want to beg me to kill you? He wanted to send the Empress to her death this instant, but when he saw the blue eyes shaking with instinctive fear, he felt the anger that had been raging inside him calm down a little. It's not gonna be that easy. Of course, he did not intend to leave the scales tilted towards the Empress for too long. Bring it in. At Paris' order, the guard guarding the door moved quickly. Shortly thereafter, the quiet dungeon became noisy after the door opened. Hey, let go of me, let go. Hick, don't hit me, I was wrong. The voice was familiar to both Perez and Rubini. Astana? Oh, mother! Astana, who had been drugged by the guards, recognized Empress Rubini and cried like a child. Although he was rigorously the first prince of the empire, Astana's wretched appearance was more of a street beggar. Even if you wash your eyes, you couldn't find the prince's inborn royalty anywhere. As Perez watched quietly, the guards released Astana's bound hands. Mother! Astana ran to Empress Rabini and grabbed the hem of her dress. His appearance in his mid-teen was surprisingly immature. If Astana had been the emperor, everyone would know who would actually have the power of the emperor. They could tell without having to think too hard. The guards who were watching beside Perez also had a hunch, and they quietly glanced among themselves and frowned. Oh, what's wrong with your face? The empress said, looking at Astana's bruised face with the trembling hands. They are. Oh, Astana said, pointing fingers at the guards who dragged him. He didn't want to come. I couldn't help it. The guard quickly made an excuse to Perez. If the sinner doesn't listen to the orders, it's inevitable. You bastard, Rabini screamed at Perez. Astana is the first prince of the empire. No matter how powerful you are right now, you can't treat his majesty's flesh and blood like this. Empress Rabini hugged Astana with one arm as she screamed at him. Perez replied coldly to their miserable appearance. I've been given a command to thoroughly interrogate the sinner, regardless of their status. Jovains, the Empress gritted her teeth, furious. It was quite different from the one who said a little while ago, we only fought a war. Soon after, she shouted while staring daggers at Perez, You're a devil. Astana, who was embraced by the Empress, burst into tears. Mother, they treated me poorly. How dare they treat me like an animal? It's okay, Prince, it's okay. The Empress acted like a poor mother protecting her son, and the image of them touched something inside Perez. The color of his red eyes darkened as he looked at the two hugging each other. Did she say he was a devil? If so, he will have to live up to that expectation. Astana. Astana lifted his head at Perez's call and sniffled. What? What? His Majesty has entrusted me with the full investigations of this rebellion and the attempted murder. Perez's words reacted Astana through the cold Namely, Vera's words reached Astana through the cold prison walls. That's why you have been locked up in the dungeon rather than in your palace for days. As expected, you, and yet the real culprit behind what happened in the forest of the Pazo has not been revealed. Astana paused. His stupid head worked fiercely, trying to figure out the meaning of Vera's words. Vera's meant that Astana's fate will be laid at ease. I'll make it easy for you. In short, either you or your mother will be the culprit. Oh, then, but as the Empress said, you have inherited the precious blood of the Emperor. So I will give you a choice, Paris said with a grin, with only one side of his mouth raised. Right here, right now. Admit that your mother, Empress Rabini, gave you a dagger and she told you to harm the emperor. What? Then I'll take into account your cooperation with the investigation and get you out of jail right away. Paris made one more suggestion. Throughout the days in prison, Astana called the food his guards gave him garbage, and he never touched anything. If you write down a detailed confession of the situation at the time in your handwriting, I'll provide you with everything you want to eat. The whole incident in the forest of the Pazos went as planned by Perez. Astana had to get out of jail and fabricate things that didn't even happen on the condition of food. Perez waited for Astana's reply in a relaxed manner. That's ridiculous. Rabini made a mockery of Perez's suggestion in her heart. It was neither a proposal to guarantee survival nor a proposal to guarantee him minimum rights as a crown prince. In this situation, where life may be lost due to immediate reason, Paris' offer in return was too pointless. Who would accept it? The Empress' ridicule stopped when Astana released his hands from holding her and moved away. Prince, surprised, Ravini called Astana, but Astana avoided her gaze. At the same time, a sneer appeared in Paris' eyes. The Empress was stunned and tried to stop Astana. She was trying to advise him that he shouldn't fall for Paris' words, which doesn't even guarantee his life. Prince, if you went through such a suggestion, it wasn't my fault from the beginning. Astana muttered, still unable to even look at Rabini. It's all my mother's fault, and it's not fair for me to get involved. Rabini gave up trying to help Astana. Instead, she trembled with his betrayal. Oh, how? How dare you do this? Isn't this all because my mother and Anjanas were greedy beyond their means? Astana shook away Rabini's hand that was holding him. If a noble woman in the western region had become an empress, she should have been satisfied with it. How dare you include me in your plots? Astana shouted as he shot up from the ground. Astana has now condemned Rabini, and he said with a glaring smile at Perez, you and I are brothers, brothers with the same father and share the same blood. Not only that, he came up with persuasion. Whatever you say, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Whatever my mother and Anjanus do, it has nothing to do with me, brother. With his hand reaching out, Perez slid away to avoid it. Instead, he gave an order to the guards. Let go of me. I'll walk on my own feet. Astana said, glaring at the guards and rushing out of the prison. I want to eat freshly baked bread and meat. You better have it ready. Astana, who was getting farther away, looked back at Ravini once. But that was it. Leaving his mother alone on the cold prison floor, Astana escaped from the dungeon, fleeing. That moron, Astana's well-being was guaranteed only until he receives his confession, although he doesn't seem to know it yet. Perez scoffed, looking at Astana's back. Ha 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 ha. The Empress sat down and laughed in frustration. Her eyes have no focus, and looking blankly on the prison floor. How can? I'm glad that he didn't meet your expectations, Perez said in a voice with a hint of laughter. Hearing him say that, Ravini cried out, you must be happy to have your revenge, but that's only for a moment. Soon you will be consumed with vengeance. Then looking as if she realized something, she grabbed her belly and laughed. Ha ha, yes, it already worked. You succeed in taking the throne to get your revenge on me. It means you can't live with that girl for the rest of your life. Ha 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 ha. The Empress' hysterical laughter rang loudly in the cell. That's great, indeed. Keep living miserably. However, tears were flowing from the Empress' eyes. Thump, thump. Even at that moment, even at the moment when she laughed out of her mind, the Empress was beating her chest with her fist, grieving. The sound of laughter suddenly became a cry, like that of an animal, and at one point she went into hysterics. However, the Empress' laughter suddenly cut off, and she snappily said, kill me, as the Empress who dared to to kill the Emperor. As the Empress who dared to kill the Emperor, put me on the execution table. Shouldn't you have to complete your revenge? It was a voice full of exhaustion, as if breaking apart, but Paris shook his head. You underestimated me again. My revenge is not something you even dare to complete with your death. With a distinctly different tone, Paris tossed a piece of paper at the feet of the Empress. The Empress will be held in seclusion. That means you're no longer the Empress of the Lambro Empire. It also means you can't die on the execution table. Rabini's withering hands barely picked up the paper. Paris once again confirmed to Rabini, you're nothing anymore. Rabini's body began to tremble as if she was hit by lightning. No, you can't. I can't. No. Rabini shook his head in denial for her reality. Paris approached Rabini, looming over her, and lowered his posture. Then he said decisively, looking straight at her bloodshot, tear-studded blue eyes. Let me be clear. You're going to die here. It could be today. It could be tomorrow. Rabini's cracked lips trembled, listening to Perez. You're going to die. However, it did not evoke any emotions in Perez. Someone could come in and attack you, or could cut your throat when you're asleep, or maybe a guard will serve you poison. Rabini's face was slowly tinged with fear. So live each day in hell, feeling that today will be your last day. Forgotten and rot in this place where no one saves you. Rabini and Janus. Perez said before getting up and leaving the cell. Not like that. Ah, rather you kill me. Kill me now. No. Rabini rushed to attack Perez in order for herself to be killed on the spot, but it was futile, since she was quickly caught by the guards. Perez finally ordered the guards in a cold tone. If the sinner wants to kill herself, gag her and tie her limbs. Perez's steps walking out of the dungeon were buried in Rabini's scream. But that's only for a while. When the thick door shut behind Perez's back, all he could hear was the sough of the wind. Everything about Rabini was now locked inside this dungeon. Perez walked through the imperial palace without looking back. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I haven't seen Perez this past few days. I said to Clarivan as we left Anjana's mansion. I'm sure he's busy. He's in charge of all the work assigned by the Emperor. Oh, that's right. The Emperor's condition is still not getting better today, and probably until tomorrow. Someone will have to take care of the piled up work. I need to get used to it. Paris will get busier and busier. The same was true for me. So in the future, I won't be able to get back and forth as often as before. Even though I knew it well, my heart still felt sore. Ignoring the pain, I spoke to Clarivan. Let's ride the carriage together. I will drop you off on the way. Thank you. The inside of the carriage returning from the imperial city to the Lombardy estate was quiet. I think it's about time. Well, Lady Florentia. As expected, Clarivan carefully opened his mouth. What is it, Clarivan? It was Clarivan who said he wanted to say something to me last time. Anjana's family was coming to an end. I was right when I thought it was time for Clarivan to bring up what he wanted to say. Ha, after a short sigh, Clarivan looked at me and pulled something out of his coat. What's this? I asked, opening the paper, and it felt like my heart was thumping and sinking as I read the contents. This. This is the life contract that I wrote upon the creation of the pellet company. Clarivan coughed loudly once again and he said, Please terminate this contract. What? I would like you to accept my resignation from the pellet company, Lady Florentia. End of chapter 238. Hmm. Chapter 239. Ramasi Dillard. Clarivan's father entered the pellet company office, which had just resumed its normal operations. Today, he had been waiting for this day since he already scheduled an appointment a few days ago. As for Clarivan, the reason for his discomfort was not because of Ramasi Dillard. I haven't seen you in a long time, Sir Clarivan. It was because of William Dillard, the oldest son of Ramasi, who entered the office along with their father. William, who was 2 years younger than Clarivan, had an uncanny resemblance to Ramasi Dillard, to the extent anyone could see in just a glance that he was indeed his son. Unlike Clarivan, who resembles his mother, blonde-haired, and had a sharp impression, William was an impressive man, with pale brown hair and expressive eyes. From head to toe, there was no corner in his body that wasn't polite and straightforward at all. He has an appearance that resembled his youngest sister, Laurel. Yes, it's been a while, Lord William Dillard. Clarivan greeted him with a businesslike attitude, concealing his discomfort. Judging from the fact that their father was with William Dillard, who would soon inherit the leader position of Lombardy Merchant Guild, he decided it would not be a private visit. What brings the people here from Lombardy Merchant Guild? He didn't have the hobby of talking needlessly with someone sitting across from him while on the job. When Clarivan asked, William glanced at his father Romasi. It looks like you haven't taken over the right to decide yet. It was well known that William, the eldest son of the Dillard family and the current Merchant Guild deputy leader, began his succession wholeheartedly so he can flawlessly take over the position of the leader in the future. However, Clarivan knew that the process wasn't going very smoothly. It was because he was lagging behind in the competition with the pellet company in several fields. However, quite a few people made it an issue because it is related to the legacy of the Lombardy Merchant Guild, the largest trading organization in the empire. It was a long and laborious process. However, whether he takes over or not, the guild's operations were already fluctuating. He has to reject them properly today. Clarivan thought so and clasped his hands firmly on his knees. He doesn't know if it's going to be later. There's no need for Pellet to share the burden of collaborating with the Lombardy Merchant Guild, whose standing was now shaking. Today, Romasi Dillard suddenly took the opportunity to speak up first. Clarivan's eyes narrowed slightly. It was because Romasi Dillard seemed very nervous. What the hell is going on? I came here to make a request to the manager of the pallet company. Romasi Dillard said, taking turns looking at Clarivan and William. Please take over Lombardy Merchant Guild. There was a moment of silence before Clarivan, who was quietly watching Romasi Dillard, opened his mouth in confusion. Take over the Lombardy Merchant Guild? What do you mean? I mean it in a literal sense. I want the pellet company manager to succeed me as the leader of Lombardy Merchant Guild. He didn't hear it wrong. Clarivan quietly looked at William Dillard. Recognizing the meaning of that gaze, William spoke in a calm voice. I was the one who suggested it first. Why would you do that? Clarivan asked, raising one eyebrow. That's a ridiculous suggestion. Clarivan will succeed Romasi. Isn't he perfectly serving as the deputy leader? Do you think so? I'm glad it looked like that. William smiled with a wary face. I have tried tirelessly to take over my father's position over the past few years, but it was just my way of reaffirming that it was beyond my ability. I know that the process of succession is not easy. I know what I'm capable of, but I'm not a good enough vessel to lead Lombardy Merchant Guild. William Dillard shook his head and continued. I know that I'll get used to it over time and I'll be able to imitate our father, but that's all there is to it. Even if I do my best, I can only keep the status quo at the Merchant Guild. Don't you know that a Merchant Guild that doesn't improve is bound to fall soon? William Dillard, who said so, had a very grim face for a man who was only in his 40s. But Clarivan shook his head lightly. That doesn't explain it. The Lord has 3 sons. Not 4, but 3. Clarivan didn't count himself. It was natural for him to think so because he was an illegitimate child who was not officially recognized as a Dillard. I don't know how this might sound, but William said after a moment of hesitation, none of our brothers and sisters, include Laurel, has inherited our father's brilliance like you. Once again, there was a heavy silence. Clarivan looked at Romasi Dillard, who sat opposite of him, still motionless from his initial posture. With a heavy heart, he opened his mouth to reject their proposal. I refuse. Help the Lombardy Merchant Guild, Sir Clarivan. William said, with his head down. I understand how shameless it is to ask this favor to Sir Clarivan as a Dillard. There was no sign of humiliation from William Dillard, even though he bowed his head to his half-brother. William Dillard was originally that kind of person. Please consider, Please reconsider. Romasi Dillard also appealed to him. Even at this moment, it was difficult to conceal the complicated feelings of the cold Clarivan. Clarivan was the product of a mistake. When he was young, he wondered for a while after he learned of it, but he had already accepted it for a long time. Romasi Dillard did not publicly acknowledge Clarivan, but he took responsibility through financial support. So he had no feelings of resentment that he would have at this age. No, he just thought so. Please take over Lombardy Merchant Guild. However, there seemed to be something left in his middle-aged heart, seeing how this important man of the Dillard family bows his head, and the bitterness he felt. I have no desire to join the Dillard family anymore, Clarivan said with a stiff face. Ramasi Dillard replied, You don't need to change your last name to Dillard. I'm just proposing to the Clarivan Pellet, who does a great job over the pellet company, to become the next Lombardy Merchant Guild leader. But if that happens, the Dillard family will lose their rights to the Lombardy Merchant Guild. I guess so, Ramasi Dillard replied so easily, as if he was already prepared for it. But there is something more important than the Dillard family, the Lombardy Merchant Guild. Right. The Lombardy Merchant Guild should be led by the right person. If there is no such person in the next dealer generation, it should be handed over to someone with the same ability to lead. That is my duty as Lombardy's vassal. He has a terrible sense of loyalty, but Caravan could understand that mind. He would have made the same decision if he were in Romasi Dillard's shoes. If so, there are conditions. Tell me, Romasi Dillard said, with a small sigh with a determined look. Even if I become Lombardy's merchant guild leader, Dillard's people should not be pulled out from the guild. What? The people you hired from the Dillard family should not quit their jobs just because I will feel inconvenienced. Well, that's rather it was a request from the Dillard family. But then, wouldn't that be problematic for Claravan? Confused, William questioned. Claravan spoke coldly to William. It's going to be years before the merchant guild adapts to the management change. If all of Dillard's people suddenly resign, I can't risk the guild standing just because I want to work at my convenience. His loyalty to Lombardy is indefinite, and even more so if it's for the future Lombardy that Florentia will lead. Thank you, Claravan. As if he had a weight off his chest, William, with a bright complexion, bowed his head once again as he thanked Claravan. Don't thank me yet. I can't give you a definite answer until I get permission from my employer. Oh, then. William seemed to look puzzled. Knowing his thoughts, Claravan answered, Shouldn't I have to get permission from my employer, Lady Florentia? She is the lady I serve after all. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Who is it? I asked coldly. Yes? Who are those bastards that tempted Clarivan? Oh, I'm getting mad. Unknowingly, curses came out of my mouth. Who dares to take our Clarivan away? I'll do better no matter what conditions you have, so don't go. I sound like some crappy ex-boyfriend, but I'm serious. They can take Clarivan away. Wait, are you thinking of becoming independent? Then it's not good to stop him. I can't be a bad boss, blocking my employee's path to his future. Then you can do everything you want to do. However, asterisk, I've been wrapping my head around for a while. The thought that Clarivan will live and set on his own path. But Clarivan's reaction was a little weird. Seeing my struggles, Clarivan started to laugh. Ha 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 ha. Clarivan? Sorry, I'm sorry. Ah, Lady Tia is so cute. Clarivan said, wiping the tears from the corner of his eyes. Lord Romasi Dillard has been proposing to me to take over the Lombardy Merchant Guild leader. Guild leader? Ah, right. In his previous life, Clarivan had succeeded Romasi as the Lombardy Merchant Guild leader. When my grandfather died, he left Lombardy and set up Pellet Company. Clarivan seemed to have mixed feelings. That's quite understandable. He wasn't using the Dillard's name, but he suddenly has to take over the position of Dillard in Lombardy. Then you can hand over the pellet company to Violet. That's what I think. Violet will do well. From pellet to Lombardy. So Clarivan's still my person, right? Clarivan, who opened his eyes wide, soon smiled and nodded. Yes, that's right. The person of Lady Florentia. Clarivan's face was a little red, saying that, "Are you relieved of your anger now?" "Yeah, I'm fine now. I thought someone was stealing Clarivan away. I was really distraught. That nearly took 10 years of my lifespan." Thank God. Clarivan smiled broadly at my words. I looked at the smiling face for a moment. In my previous life, Clarivan wasn't that bright. He had always a dark and sharp look, and sometimes he was wearing a smile bordering cynical. "I'm very glad to meet you, Lady Florentia." Clarivan said that out of the blue. "So do I." We're sitting across from each other, both me and Clarivan. How different we have become in this life. It was a new feeling. I said to Clarivan with a smile, "I look forward to your kind cooperation, Clarivan Pellet of Lombardy Merchant Guild." End of chapter 239. Chapter 240. There were a total of four types of meetings leading the empire. The first is the bureaucratic meeting held by officials from various ministries. The second is the council meeting, which is held by aristocrats. And the third is the nobles meeting, where aristocrats and the emperor gather in one place to discuss important issues of the empire. However, the last one is called the parliamentary assembly meeting, which is held most often than the three meetings mentioned, and to discuss detailed agendas. Seven representatives of the aristocracy attended this meeting to collect the results of all three meetings and make a summary report to the emperor. And today was Paris' first parliamentary meeting as the emperor regent. Chairman Killian and the others who attended as representatives of the aristocracy were sitting and waiting for Perez, the second prince and soon to be crown prince, to arrive with his officials. The deputy head of Lombardy is also a little late, Chairman Killian said, looking at the still empty chair. Sitting next to him, Lord Maimbert moved closer and told Chairman Killian, "Don't you think today's meeting will end soon?" "That's what I was thinking. Let's have a meal together after the meeting, shall we?" "Let's do it. Why don't we all have a meal together?" "That's a great idea. Ha 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 ha." The nobles laughed leisurely and talked lightly. Even at the last meeting, held by Emperor Jovin's, this situation was unimaginable. There was a reason why they were so relaxed. His Highness the Second Prince is proficient at his work, isn't he? That's what they say. Also, don't you know, my third child is working in the finance department now. I heard he's been promoted recently. Congratulations. Yes, thank you. But that's not the point. Since His Highness began to perform as His Majesty's regent, the faces of the officials have brightened. It is said that the burden of their workload has been cut in half. You mean that much? Chairman Killian intervened with his eyes wide open. Indeed, it really has cut in half. The person who brought it up said with frustration, "Does that mean that the officials of today had it easy for you to say that?" Then he lowered his voice a little and said, "My child attended the bureaucratic meeting a few days ago, and he said that it was as if His Highness can see through everything." See through everything. Officials have to explain further and persuaded His Majesty of most of the agendas from previous bureaucratic meetings. This time, however, even before the officials told His Highness, he was not only familiar with all the issues, but he was capable enough to offer solutions that the officials could not come up with. Oh, that's incredible. And most of the agendas are already solved when His Highness gives separate instructions before even coming up to the meeting. So everyone pouring their hearts out saying that their work has become easier. Upon hearing the story, Chairman Killian leaned over to the nobleman next to him. Did it not seem like that yesterday? Come to think of it. Yesterday, they held a noble meeting. It was the first meeting in a long time, so everyone attended the meeting with an expectation that the meeting would be prolonged. However, this time, their meeting was shorter than usual. Isn't it because the deputy head of Lombardy organized the meeting well? Chairman Killian spoke honestly. Then everyone nodded and agreed. I felt that way too. Would it have seemed like Deputy Head Lombardy mediated at the right time, said a word or two, and then immediately solved the problem? Yes, of course, it seems like that because there are no anjanas that used to be so confusing anymore. When the word Anjanas came out, each of the nobles scoffed and wore uncomfortable looks. Anjanas, one of the families that led the empire not long ago, has now become one of the forbidden words that should not be mentioned. Anyway, today's meeting is expected to end without a hitch, Chairman. Yes, His Highness the Second Prince will be present, and the deputy head of Lombardy will also attend. Oh, here she is now. Seeing Florentia after entering the conference hall, Chairman Killian stood up and said, "Everyone has already arrived before you. Sit here, Deputy Head Lombardy. The venue is a little far from the Lombardy mansion. Thank you for your hard work, Deputy Head." The attitudes of the nobles were completely different from when Florentia first became their representative. Whether she was young or a woman, it didn't matter now. The empire couldn't exist without Lombardy, and Florentia was perfectly fulfilling the role of Lombardy's deputy head. After a while, His Highness the Second Prince has arrived. Paris arrived at the conference hall, and the parliamentary assembly meeting began. As expected, our prediction was correct. The nobles nodded with satisfaction as the meeting flowed quickly and easily as if it were sailing in the fair wind. But as time went by, the satisfaction began to turn into surprise. It was because the same pattern was repeated on every agenda. First, the officials reported their agendas. In other words, the second prince grasped the issues that emerged more clearly than the officials, who were experts in the field. That's the point in the ministry. No, it's better to seek advice from the superiors who actually do business rather than the related ministries. Both Perez and Florentia engaged in a quick conversation. After that, the official, who suffered from a bottleneck brought by his agenda, nodded his head in gratification and exclaimed, I can do that. I'll apply it quickly and send a report. So it hasn't been a few hours, but the meeting has already ended with Chairman Killian and the other aristocrats uttering not a single word. Oh my god, I'm sorry, I haven't contributed once. The nobles laughed sheepishly, but were happy. Everyone has years of experience as a Central Region aristocrat, but who knew they didn't take that much attention? I have a previous engagement, so I'll take my leave. Having said that, the prince immediately got up and left the conference hall. Before leaving, Paris glanced at Tia, planning to greet her, but it seemed she was busy talking to Chairman Killian. Deputy Head Lombardi, do you have an appointment after this? No, there's none. Then why don't you join us for a meal? We sometimes get together after a parliamentary meeting. Although she was the same age as some of the aristocrats, granddaughters or daughters, the aristocrats gathered around her and waited for her answer. However, everyone was sullen by the sight of Florentia hesitating for a little. They wondered if she didn't want to share a table with the older ones. Have you already chosen a place? When asked, instead of answering, Chairman Killian shook his head, a little embarrassed. Then let's go to a place that I know of. The owner of Caramel Avenue opened a new restaurant this time, and their menu is good. I've heard the news too, but they said I have to wait a few weeks before I can get a seat. It will be fine because I know the owner of the place personally. Let's go there. Oh, as expected, the aristocrats who were influential enough to attend the parliamentary meeting walked behind Florentia. No one had yet realized that the herd's initiative had already been taken over by Florentia. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I'm looking forward to it. The person who suggested it told me about the place a few days ago. I'm going to be hated for being there first. Ha ha ha. As I slowly exited the conference hall and walked through the Imperial Palace, I was listening to the merry conversation behind me. Even if they look like that now, they were still the people who rushed to kill each other at yesterday's nobles' meeting. Each family is thus completely at odds in public, but in private, they are quite close together. Again, Bates' information has excellent accuracy. Anyway, there wasn't a good place to collect information like the places Bates operated, so I offered them Bates' place first. Since the main customers of Caramel Avenue are noble women, there was a limit to the type of information collected. So this time, I rented another building to open a room-style restaurant that also sells alcohol. I gave them free rent for life again, but don't tell me I'm going to be kicked out of the door just because you're busy. As I was walking with that thought in mind, Chairman Killian spoke to me. I was really relieved. What do you mean? It's about Deputy Head Lombardi and His Highness the Second Prince. I had a rough idea of what he was going to talk about. I smiled adroitly and looked straight ahead, pretending to listen to Chairman Killian. It's not easy to leave a political relationship once you're engaged. Right, I answered mechanically. So I was worried about whether the two of you would be able to work hand in hand as a head Lombardi and the Crown Prince in the future. Today, those worries have completely disappeared. I didn't know, Chairman Killian. It seems you were a talkative man. I nodded my head superficially and replied in moderation. However, as soon as I saw a pair of a man and a woman in the distance, my heart sank. Chairman Killian asked me at that exact time, you probably ended your engagement on a good note, right? Indeed, have we cleared up the engagement? At that moment, the people walking behind me found the man and woman I was looking at and said in amazement, isn't that the second prince and Lady Brown? End of chapter 240.